So that is my reaction to this film, Hundreds of Beavers. Now, that name says a lot, and maybe it says a little bit too much about the movie, as the title in itself is a minor spoiler about the movie. Now, at first, I thought Hundreds of Beavers was some sort of metaphor or some sick euphemism about some guy who's able to get like 100 women in bed. But no, this absurdly titled film is exactly what it promises. It's about a man who is tasked with killing hundreds of actual beavers. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. As this film debuts on Blu-ray, let's dive into whether this is a hidden gem or it's just a wild ride with beavers in the crosshairs. Hi, I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films, and if you would take just a moment, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to my channel. Go ahead and like this video and hit that bell button if you want notifications about when I release other videos in the future. When I first heard about this, I heard about it, it was released through a sub-label through Vinegar Syndrome at the beginning of subscriber month, which is this month, and when I first saw it and heard the title, I was like, damn, that sounds really ridiculous. Not even ridiculous. Like I said, I really thought it was like some kind of euphemism. I was like, okay, no, I'm not even interested in that remotely. But then I started seeing people posting about it, and it started kind of piquing my interest a little bit. I was like, maybe I should go take a second look and see what the deal is with this film. And so I went back and I looked, and unfortunately I got it a little too late. As you can see, I don't have a slipcover because there was a special edition that had a slipcover with it. But so I went back on to the Vinegar Syndrome site, and this is through a Vinegar Syndrome sublabel called Cartuna, but it actually spelled car and then Tuna, like the fish, Cartuna, but kind of because they release cartoon stuff somewhat. Now this does have some animation, and we're going to get into that here in just a bit. But it is a mixture of live action and animation. And so I went onto the site, and then I saw the trailer, and I was like, oh my god, this looks amazing. I'm going to have to get this. And so I did. And as you can see, I have it now. But it may not be for all taste, and maybe I would probably take a look at that trailer to kind of get an idea about what's going on in this film. I'm going to try to describe it here, but I can't really do it justice myself. I think looking at it and seeing exactly what it is, you'll have an idea in your head about whether you can handle this type of film. So the film is about a man who, at the beginning of the film, he's got an orchard, and he brews like Applejack. Now Applejack was I guess it's still kind of made some. I've never had it before, but it sounds pretty awesome. It is a kind of a beer, or like a cider beer, a very strong fermented cider beer. Apparently, from reading about it, it's about 30% to 40% alcohol. I went ahead and got some cider beer, and I got like a kind of mug just because that happens in this film. Watching those scenes, I was like, okay, I could drink some of this. That's pretty good. This is actually like a cherry pie apple flavor. This is a handcrafted from Atlanta. But in the film, he basically sells Applejack, and it takes place in, I think, the early 19th century. And the opening, it has him in live action, but everything else going on around him is mostly cartoons, including a lot of people who come over there, and has big tables. It takes place in the fall at the beginning, and then they have these big tables, all these people coming over there drinking Applejack, and they're like, yeah, Applejack. And he gets a little bit too into drinking the Applejack himself. He actually has two funnels on top of his head, and he's drinking the Applejack out of the funnels. He's just getting like completely wasted drunk. So drunk that he doesn't notice it when the beavers show up, and the beavers start kind of chewing at his wood. And he's got these big, large water tower size kegs of apple cider or Applejack, and then they start chewing onto those kegs, and then they knock it over, and then they steal one of them completely, but then the second one they knock it over, and then he ends up jumping on top of it, and it rolls into his cabin and explodes the cabin, and explodes. It catches the whole orchard on fire. And we're going to talk about the style of this in just a minute, but it all catches on fire, and then he wakes up, and it's winter, and he's completely covered in snow, and his whole orchard's destroyed, all his kegs, all his Applejack's gone, and then he has to kind of fend for himself and figure out how to get food, and he starts going after the animals and things of that nature. But before I'm going to come back to the story here in a little bit. Now, I would highly recommend watching this film. It is something that has to be experienced. Now, and it is done in a slapstick comedy style, and almost like a silent movie like there's occasional words of dialogue, but it's done like a silent film. It reminds me a lot, and it did borrow a lot from the film Gold Rush with Charlie Chaplin's film. This is an excellent film, but it does borrow a lot from this, especially in the first part of it, but in the style of it, and the whole thing takes place outside in the snow for the most part. So let's talk a little bit about the style of it. So it's very interesting style. They green screen the main guy in some of the scenes, and then they put animation behind him. And there's a lot of animation in here, but it's also live action. And the whole thing is black and white. And they intentionally make it look worse than the way that it was shot, and they make it look grainy on purpose in a lot of the scenes. But I think kind of try to match some of the elements they had to put in there. But there's a lot of kind of Looney Tunes cartoon-like comedy in it, and there's a fairly bit of absurdity to the whole thing. But it does make it fairly hilarious. And here's the thing: when you're watching this, I think this is probably how it's going to go down. You might not like it at all, but for me, it was like you're watching it first. You're kind of like, I don't know if I'm going to get into this, but then it just the further you get into the film, the more hilarious it gets. It just keeps getting more and more hilarious as it goes on, and they do such a good job with the silent film part of it. And it's funny when every now and then they'll pop in with an actual line of something out of nowhere. It's a very high contrast, black and white, going on with the film. And it looks like the scenes where he's out in the snow, it looks like they shot it out in actual snow for the most part. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, how I know about it here once I show you the actual physical movie set. But there's also animals in here, like beavers and rabbits, and there's wolves. The wolves are kind of the bad guys. There's even some dogs, and all of these animal characters, except for the woodpecker who's animated, or a majority of them. And there's also a fish that's a puppet, but majority of them are played by people and kind of a mascot, like mascot from like a ball game, sort of like altered a little bit. And so it's pretty obvious that that's going on, and it makes it hilarious, really. Even though they're in these suits, they get a lot of good expressions from them, a lot of good like sort of thing, and those sort of kind of sounds. They're friggin' hilarious, but you have to be able to accept it. And it actually is funny to me, the crude special effects, which is put together like green screen and then other special effects, and it's just the whole everything together, all those elements combined really make this film like friggin' awesome, I think. All right, so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the story. I'm going to try not to spoil the whole thing. So eventually he gets a little better at hunting, and he gets a bunch of fish, and he goes to this guy who's got like a kind of a store where you can trade in things that you've killed, like animals that you've killed for money or items. If you get enough money, then or particular animals, then he'll give you, like, say, an axe or a gun or some other item. And he's also got a daughter there who really right off the bat is very attracted to the main character here. Now, the main character here, played by Ryan Briskin Cole Tews, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He has worked with the director previously on his other movie, Michigan Lake Monster, which I was somewhat aware about. I haven't seen it yet. Actually, after seeing this movie, I went ahead and ordered a copy of it. I got one coming in the mail. Looking forward to checking that out. But he does a lot of physical comedy, and he puts himself through a lot of stuff. I'm surprised he didn't get hurt making this film. He probably did at some point, the kind of physical comedy he has to do. But he does a very good job at it. A lot of physicality involved in the film. But he's quite hilarious, and he makes very, very awesome facial expressions, and it works really well within the silent film part, kind of like a Charlie Chaplin sort of thing. But even though this is a big dude, he's not like Charlie Chaplin, who would play a tramp character. This guy is kind of playing like, I mean, he starts off with the Applejack stuff, and everyone's loving him with that. But then he becomes a drunk. But then he becomes kind of a nobody, like Charlie Chaplin's tramp character. But he's a big dude, so he's not ever going to be like the little guy, like they would call Charlie Chaplin in the Gold Rush. Now, this film was directed by, I'm going to try to pronounce his name right, Mike Cheslick, and it's probably not right, but he does a friggin' great job on this film, of the film, and putting all these elements together and just making it very whimsical and very, very dark sense of humor in some of it, where you got these animals getting killed, and then it's funny because they when they get killed, immediately like their eyes are like X's, like that's what they look like when they're killed, and then he takes them and he goes and brings them to the merchant, and he trades it for other stuff, and then the guy's daughter is like just kind of like in love with him, like I guess infatuated with him right away. She's digging him, but the dad doesn't like him. He thinks he's a loser because he thinks he's a drunk because of the Applejack stuff at the beginning. But he starts to eventually kind of start to have a little bit more respect for him. Now he actually wants his daughter, the merchant wants his daughter to get with this master fur trapper who kind of looks like Santa Claus, and that's kind of part of this film. It starts in the fall and it kind of goes through Christmas, but it doesn't really make a big deal about Christmas or anything like that. But there is snow in most of the film, so it kind of has a nice kind of a Christmassy vibe going on, even though it doesn't say this is Christmas. There's almost like a kind of like when the master fur trapper, when you first see him, and he's got all these dogs who are people dressed up like dogs, kind of look like Pluto from the Mickey Mouse. But when you first see him, there's kind of almost like a Christmas-like kind of jingle that happens. So and he kind of looks like Santa Claus a little bit. The master fur trapper, he ends up helping the main character and start trying to teach him how to trap things and make more money, like selling animals, than he was doing the Applejack. Well, the Applejack farm orchard was a big investment, getting it all started and getting those Applejack big ass keg things. So in order to get all that back, it's going to take years probably. So he can immediately go and start killing raccoons and beavers and whatnot and making money off of that. So that's what he goes into. It's a quicker way of making money, and he's got the love interest of the daughter. The more stuff he kills, the more impressed she is. So eventually the man is tasked by the merchant to get him hundreds of beavers in order to win his daughter's hand in marriage. And so that's kind of what sets the name of the film, even though that doesn't happen until later in the movie, into motion. And then he has to go get hundreds of beavers, and eventually these beavers are pretty smart for the most part, and they have been building this big fort, this big beaver fort. That's where they have his Applejack stuff in the fort, and he eventually has to fight them in a hilarious, like, over the top action sequence at the end where it's almost reminiscent of some Star Wars Return of the Jedi. I think when they get on those little flying cars and they're on Endor and they're doing all that, but the beavers are chasing him on sleds and stuff like that. And when he goes into the place, it almost reminds me of Star Wars. It's almost like the Death Star, like this big building that they've log fortress that he has to go into in order to accomplish his mission. But it's pretty damn awesome sequence with those beavers him having to fight the beavers, and some of the beavers, like he'll like shoot one of their heads off, and it's so absurd, it's so stupid that it's hilarious, and it's something that you just have to see this thing to believe it. So let's take a quick peek at this release. Unfortunately, like I said before, I did not get the slipcover. I wish I had, but this is it's very interesting. Here we go. So there's two discs, and for some reason when you open up disc 2, and here's a booklet that has a lot of information about the film. And here's disc 1. Disc 1 has the movie on it. There's also, see this in the background here? This is like a map of the trapping area that he gets from the master trapper that tells him where to go to get certain things. Now, disc 2 has the movie, and it has a special effects breakdown of the film. And so what, if you're watching it, and I'm going to put some stills up about this, it's cut into 4 sections. And on the top left, you see what it looks like in the actual movie, and then the other 3, it will show like a storyboard picture, and then it will show the elements that they combined together to put each special effect together, and the whole movie runs like that. And it's friggin' very informative about how these effects were made. Like some of them were green screen, some of them were like the guy walking out in the snow, and then they layered like some other animation with it. So it's a very badass thing, and there's apparently 10 hours of extra footage, extra bonus material on here. But like inside this, it shows like different posters of this. This is hilarious. Like they got on like Showgirls, like Beavers, or like Pulp Fiction, like Hundreds of Beavers, Pulp Fiction, and then just different movies. There's like No Country for Old Men there. Different movie posters. Oh, this is fantastic. Like a Rocky Horror Picture Show and Hundreds of Beavers, Reservoir Dogs. Man, this is hilarious. This is Vertigo and Fargo. And there's a lot of... I guess that's what this whole booklet's about. Just different movie posters, like a RoboCop, Ghostbusters with the Beavers. That's awesome, really. I do have one minor complaint about the film. It is maybe a little over long, running about an hour and 48 minutes. It probably would have played better at an hour and a half, but it still works really well. And really the climatic part with the Beavers is friggin' like fantastic. It probably around 52 minutes into the film, I kind of started to feel that it was... Well, this thing's been on for a while, hadn't it? And it probably could have shortened some of the earlier stuff and maybe some of the stuff in the middle. But at the same time, I'm glad it's all in there. Like I said, I really enjoyed the film. So let's go ahead and rate the movie. And just to prove how much I enjoyed it, I'm going to go ahead and slap this thing with a 4-star rating. I thought it was that friggin' fantastic. I'm going to give Cartuna... I'm going to give them a 4-star rating on this as well. I wish I had that slipcover, but I don't have it. But at the same time, even with the slipcover, it's probably still a 4-star. They did great with the second disc, with the breakdown, and lots of bonus footage. And that booklet in there with the beaver posters, that's funny as hell. Now, I really would like to try some of the real Applejack, just to see what that thing is all about. This is very good here, but the Applejack is probably way too strong, and that's probably why they stopped selling it. Anyway, in conclusion... Hundreds of Beavers delivers a refreshingly original and absurd experience. It had me laughing from start to finish. I think it deserves to be seen by a wider audience, and I would recommend adding this to your Christmas viewing list. So, if you haven't done so already, if you'd go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel. I'm Dave Watkins. Thanks for watching.